All right, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for attending. This is our campaign finance reporting workshop for political committees. We tried this originally a couple weeks ago. We had some technological difficulties at that time, so we're trying again today. Knock on wood, it actually works today. My name is Scott Cook. I'm the legal investigator and compliance specialist with the Commissioner of Political Practices. Commissioner Mangan is unavailable to run this training today, so I'm going to kind of step in for him. Some of you may have attended one of our previous trainings. If so, this one's going to cover all of the same things. If you've not attended one before, I believe it's going to be very helpful in understanding the SIR system and how to navigate it, where to go, et cetera, et cetera. I do believe this is going to be a big help for committees. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So on our website, politicalpractices.mt.gov, which most of you should be familiar with, we have a treasure trove of resources. The best one we have for the SIR system is the Guide to Navigating SIRS. So this is available on our website. If you go to politicalpractices.mt.gov and click on the Online Services tab, kind of scroll down the page here, you'll see there's a link to actually access SIRS, which we'll walk through here in a minute. This is the Candidate and Treasurer Guide to Navigating SIRS. It is approximately 30 pages, 38 pages. It's very in-depth. It is more in-depth than what I can cover in this training today. I'm not going to be able to get through everything that this guide does. So I would recommend after this training, if you have specific questions, I would recommend you reference the guide. If you still have a question, you still don't understand it, I didn't explain it very well, which is entirely possible, feel free to send us an email to cpphelp@mt.gov. Also, before we get too far into this, I want to point out I am the only one running this training today. So if you have a question about something I say during the training, please send that to us via email, cpphelp@mt.gov. cpphelp@mt.gov. Please email us your questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Unfortunately, because of the Zoom format and the fact that I'm the only CoPP compliance person who's on this training today, I can't really get to questions in real time, but feel free to ask them via email once this training is over, and we will get back to you as quickly as we can. So the first thing I want to walk through with everybody is how to actually log into SIRS. Most of you are probably familiar with this. I know we've had one committee reporting period already, the March 20th or March 30th reporting period. So most of you probably know how to get in, but I'm going to give you a little refresher anyway, because that's always good. You only do it once a month, and so I understand you probably forget or don't remember. And that's okay. You know, you guys have other things going on. We are here to provide assistance like this. So the first step is to getting into SIRS is clicking on this Access SIRS icon. It's available on the Online Services page of our website, here and here. It is also available on the home page of our website. So if you go to politicalpractices.mt.gov, our home page, and scroll down, you see an Access SIRS icon right there. It's right under the picture of Commissioner Mangan.
Hey, Scott.
There's multiple ways to get into SIRS. So once you click on that Access SIRS, it takes you to this page, Campaign Electronic Reporting System Dashboard. That's basically just the home page of the SIRS system. To actually get in to file financial reports, look at financial reports, whatever you need to do in the system, you want to click on the Access My Accounts icon. You always want to click on this Access My Accounts green icon to actually get into SIRS. That takes you to ePass Montana, which is the state login system for services such as SIRS. So click Login for ePass Montana. If you're an existing user, which most of you probably are because you've probably already filed reports, you type in your username and password. So I'm going to type in my username.
As you can see, once you log in with your username and password, it will take you to your candidate committee access ID search matrix. For political committees, you guys obviously want to check the committee list tab. This will show any political committees that are tied to your EPAS username and password. If you have trouble accessing a certain political committee that you need to file reports for, please reach out to us via telephone or email, and we can help you get that hooked up. But if you use the same EPAS username and password every time, specifically the same one you used to originally register, you should automatically pull up that committee list, and your committee name should appear there. As you can see here, I'm tied to the coffee pack. So that means every time I log in with that EPAS username and password that I just entered, I'm going to be tied to the coffee pack. So I'll be able to add a new registration, for example, amend the registration for that coffee pack, file financial reports, all of that fun stuff. I'm not sure fun is quite the right word to describe it, but you guys know what I mean. Anyway, so back to the slideshow here. So the C2, as you guys know, statement of organization, that is the committee statement of organization with the committee name, committee treasurer, all that information. Please note that we use the information listed on that statement of organization to try to contact you guys if we have questions, need to point something out to you, try to get reporting reminders out, for example. We use the information that is on the statement of organization. So please, if you guys have a change, say you change treasurers or mailing addresses or your email address changes, anything like that, please submit an amended C2 within 5 days of that change. Again, that is how the information on the C2 is what we use to actually contact you guys. So you see here, you've got the field for name, treasurer, bank, all of that information. If any of that changes, please, please, please timely amend the statement of organization so that we can know that that change happened and we can actually contact you if we need to. If you, for example, change treasurers and don't file a new C2 letting us know, we're going to keep sending stuff to the old treasurer. And this has happened to us several times. We send things to a treasurer who is no longer the treasurer, but the committee has never given us any indication that that person is not the treasurer anymore. So then the treasurer gives us a real snippy phone call, or the committee misses some important piece of information, and there's not a whole lot we can do because we're just communicating with the only information we have. So please, I can't stress enough, if you have changes to that document, please file an amended version with us reflecting those changes. And as you guys are also likely aware, there are campaign finance limits in the state of Montana. Those mostly apply to candidates. There is no limit to what a committee can accept from a funding source, but there are limits to what a committee can give to a candidate based on what kind of candidate they are and what kind of committee is making the contribution. This information, this PDF here, is available on our webpage, politicalpractices.mt.gov. If you just click on the contribution limits section of our website, it will pull this up. So again, there is, as you guys are probably aware, there is no limit to what a PAC can accept from a source. You will want to keep in mind that the candidates can't accept corporate contributions. So if you have a political committee and you are making candidate contributions and also accepting contributions from a corporate entity, you guys are fine to accept the corporate contributions, but we strongly recommend you segregate those funds, those corporate funds, so you don't turn around and accidentally give those to a candidate and the candidate could potentially get in trouble for accepting corporate funds. You guys can't serve as a, as a work through basically for corporate funds. So just keep that in mind. I'm guessing most of you guys are aware of that and already complying with that. We don't seem to have too many problems with that in this state, which is really a credit to you guys more than anything. So thank you for that. If you ever have any questions about the contribution limit stuff, of course, reach out to us via telephone or email. All right, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the actual finance reporting setup in CERS. So to actually update or amend a report that you've already filed, when you go to the report list, which we'll go to here in a minute, you will see all the reports that the committee has already filed. They'll be listed in this report list. If you need to update or amend, you click the Update or Amend Report option, one of the boxes highlighted there. If you need to file a new financial report, there are options for those down at the bottom, little blue icons. Again, I'll show you guys all this in a second. So basically, if it's an existing report and you need to make a change, you choose Update or Amend Report. If you need to add a new report, Add New is the way to go. And we'll talk about C7s and C7Es pretty much at the end of the training. They only involve the period right before an election, so they are not something you need to worry about in April, for example. So it's much, I don't want to say it's much rarer that those are the options, but those are traditionally not the option you want to choose. You generally want to add new C6 or C4 if you're an incidental committee. We did not take a picture for an incidental committee, unfortunately. So I'm going to actually show you in SIRS what this slide looks like. So we go back into SIRS, we go to our committee list, check the box next to your committee name. If you need to update the registration, you choose Amend Registration. That's what you choose if you need to say update the treasurer, add a new bank address, a new phone number, anything like that to the C2 Statement of Organization. To update finance reports, you first click on the Finance Reports icon. That will take you to your committee report list. So as you can see here, we already filed one report for January 1st of 2020 through March 25th of 2020. And we now have this pending report for the dates of March 26th through April 25th, which is the reporting period you guys will need to cover on that finance report that is due with us on the 30th. So to actually go into this report and make changes to it so I can actually file it, because as you can see it's pending, which means it has not yet been filed, and we'll get to that later. You choose the box next to the report name and then select Update or Amend Report. And eventually, whenever the system feels like it, it's going to pull up the actual report. And we'll get to all these tabs and what they mean in a minute. You guys have probably seen most of them. We'll get there. Just bear with me. We'll get to all this information. Okay, so the first type of reporting information we're going to talk about is the reporting of contributions that you guys receive. There are several different types of contributions you can receive. There are individual contributions, committee contributions, fundraisers, refunds, rebates, etc., and loans. Those are all different. They're all treated differently on campaign finance reporting. And so we're going to walk through kind of each of them individually. And then when I get to the end of that, I'm going to actually pop back into the SIRS system. And I'm going to kind of show you what it looks like to actually try to add or amend each of those types of entries, the information that's required, all that. So you'll see how that actually works in the system instead of just on a slideshow. So again, as I already showed you, here's the main tabs, and in a finance report, you choose Update or Amend. For contributions received, you always want to be in the Contributions tab. It's the very first tab option in the report. And then as you can see, there's a tab for individual contributions, a tab for committee contributions, a tab for fundraiser contributions, a tab for refunds. Rebates are also included in that tab. And then there's a loan tab in case you guys are accepting loans from other individuals or entities. So really the most common type of contribution political committees receive, it seems to me, are individual contributions. So those are contributions from an individual person. So say I myself write a check to the PAC to make things really good again, or the PAC to bring back the National Basketball Association, since I really miss basketball right now. You know, that the committee would report my contribution in the individuals tab. And so I'll walk through this, of course, here in a few minutes. You navigate to the individuals tab, and you click this add button, which pulls up another window in CSRS where you actually enter the name of the individual. As you can see over on the right-hand side of the slide, you can enter in their name, the election type that the contribution was for. One of the very common questions we get from political committees deals with that election type. Since committees aren't actually involved directly in the election, you guys aren't up for election generally. What we recommend is you pick one of primary or general. It really doesn't matter which one you pick, as long as you run with that one throughout the whole election cycle. That's really the best practice. So if you pick general, just run with general throughout the entire election. For a committee, again, since you're not actually generally up for election, that's really not a problem. You enter in the date the contribution was received in the date field, in occupation and employer information, which is required for any individual contribution you receive of $35 or more. So if you receive a check for $35.25 from John Deere, you need to put in his occupation and his employer in the occupation and employer fields. Cash check amount. So if you guys are receiving a monetary contribution, you put that in the cash check amount field. So in this example, it was $100. If it's an in-kind contribution, an in-kind contribution being an item of service of value, but not a direct cash or check deposit to the committee, you put that in the in-kind value field. And then you have to describe the item or service provided. So for example, let's say somebody contributed a $25 Amazon gift card for you to raffle off in addition to making a $50 contribution to your committee. In that scenario, you would enter $50 in the cash check amount, and then in-kind value, you'd put $25, in-kind description, Amazon gift card. And that in-kind value counts towards the $35 occupation employer reporting threshold. So if they give you a cash contribution of $10 and an in-kind contribution that's worth $50, they would be considered as giving you guys $60, for example. I hope that makes sense. Again, if you have questions later on, feel free to hit us up to phone or email. We'll walk through this in a little bit more detail here in a minute in the actual system. And show you how to enter all that type of fun stuff. Be specific, as the slide says. Your full name and complete mailing address, just as complete as you can get it. So John Smith, 1231 Drive, Billings, Montana, would be appropriate for name, address information. A common issue we run into with the occupation and employer information is that the occupation and or employer is too generic. So one of the real common examples we get, a lot of people just put consultant self, so occupation, consultant, employer self, or occupation as consultant is really the biggest one. If you put financial consultant, internet marketing consultant, marriage consultant, just the type of consultant, that is fine. And that goes for all occupations. Obviously, I can't think of every single type of occupation anyone might ever be. But if it's something where you could reasonably think, are they this kind, or are they this kind, or are they this kind, you probably need to be more specific with the occupation. And we do understand you might have to reach out to some folks. Some of them might be a little reticent to give you that information. So if you encounter someone who makes a contribution and then they're being squirrely about what their occupation is or who they're employed by, anything like that, let us know that you're actively working on it, and at that time you can come up with a plan of attack to make sure that you get that information in as required, while at the same time recognizing potential individual circumstances. And as I forgot from the last slide, I almost forgot one of the most important parts. When you're done, you hit this submit button. That actually pops whatever you've filled into these fields into the finance report. If you don't hit the submit button, say you hit cancel on accident, none of that information will appear in the finance report. And even after you hit submit, you need to hit the save button, which I'll show you here when we go into the actual CSRS system. When I'm done kind of walking through each individual tab. You need to hit save after every entry in SIRS, or it's not going to save that information. It may duplicate the name of the previous entity, the address of the previous entity, a previous amount you've entered. All sorts of different wonky things can happen that we don't want to have happen, and I'm sure you guys don't want them to happen. So just make sure you hit the save button after every entry, and the submit button when you actually want to submit to the report. When you've actually entered a contribution received, this goes for all individual, committee, fundraiser, etc. This is universal. You hit that submit button. You then hit the save button, which is right here. The SIRS system is going to pop up with a message saying success. The political committee finance report was successfully saved. And it's going to show you the name of the person whose contribution you just entered, the amount, everything you just entered will show up right here in this field. If you don't get a success, the political committee finance report was successfully saved message, it means you did not save the report. So I'd recommend hitting that save button again and making sure you actually get that message telling you that it was saved successfully. So adding a committee contribution, it's essentially similar to adding an individual contribution, except you just use the committee tab. So instead of individuals, you just click on committee. And I'll show you again when we get into the actual SIRS system kind of what that looks like. But it's basically just the same type of thing. It'll pull up the same basic field where you can enter the committee name, the date, the amount, all of that. Make sure you hit submit and save. And so again, just a reminder about corporate contributions. Those are entered as committee contributions if you're accepting them. And again, committees can accept corporate funds. That's not a problem. If that corporate entity that's donating to you is not already registered with us as a political committee, they would need to do so. Our office will likely reach out to that contributing entity if that's a concern to make that process happen. So you, the receiving entity, don't necessarily need to worry about that, although we do encourage you maybe reach out to that group and alert them to their registration reporting requirements. But it's not something that you guys have direct responsibility for at all. Would be that corporation's responsibility. And just remember for you guys, when you receive that money, to segregate it because it can't go directly to a candidate. So you can use it on an independent expenditure activity, but you can't give it directly to a candidate. The next type of contribution is a fundraiser. So for this definition, a fundraiser event is really an event where you guys do mass fund collections. So like a pass the hat, a large raffle gathering, a silent auction, those types of events. Remember to keep track of all donors at such an event. You do need to have a record of that because anonymous contributions are prohibited in the state of Montana. Political committees cannot accept anonymous contributions. So one of the recommendations we make is if you're going to have a mass collection event, that you maybe have a sign-in sheet at the door. If it's past the hat, maybe you have slips with that so the contributor can write down their information when they make the contribution. If it's a silent auction, for example, you have fields where they can put in their name, address, occupation, employer, all that stuff on the bid form. There are millions of ways to track that information. I can't get into all of them off the top of my head here. If you guys ever have a question about having a specific event and wondering if your system would work to track that information, while we can't necessarily make that determination for you, we can certainly provide our input as to whether or not we think it would work or be useful for you guys. So always, again, feel free to hit us up with that kind of question. And so any contribution you receive to that kind of event would generally go under the fundraiser tab. But there are some exceptions to what goes on the fundraiser tab. This is only for contributions of under $35 that you receive at that kind of event. So it's meant just to report a mass collection of under $35 contributions. If you receive a contribution of $35 or more from someone at the event, or their contribution at that event pushes them over the $35 threshold, they need to be reported, that individual's contribution. needs to be reported in the Individual Contributors tab. Again, the Fundraiser tab is only for mass collections of $35 or less collected at a singular event. So to add a fundraiser tab, you go into that fundraiser tab and you click the add button, just like you would for an individual contribution. And again, I'll show you that here in a second. It's going to pull up this page that you see right here, where you choose the election type, date of fundraiser. You just put in the date the fundraiser event is held. Name of fundraiser, you put in just a brief description of what the name of the fundraiser was. So, Pass the Hat Billings, Pass the Hat Helena, Candidate Meet and Greet Great Falls, Silent Auction Bozeman. Just essentially just provide enough detail for that name of fundraiser so we know what type of fundraiser it was and how it's different from maybe a similar fundraiser event. So if you just put Pass the Hat, raffle. For 4 different fundraiser events, we're going to ask you to provide more information on this name of fundraiser spot here, because we're not going to be able to tell what was the difference between those events, since they're all named the same. Location, venue, and city, pretty straightforward. Metro Park Billings, MAR office Helena, Museum of the Rockies Bozeman. That's all we need in that field, is just the venue and the city. So the next 2 fields we have are number of attendees and number of tickets sold. You do not necessarily have to fill in both of these fields. If it's a ticketed event, so people are buying tickets to attend your event, you want to put in number of tickets sold. If it's a non-ticketed event where anyone can show up, there's no entry fee to come in, you probably want to put number of attendees. So for a Pass the Hat kind of event, you probably want to fill in number of attendees, versus for maybe a fundraising dinner where you have to buy a table or a dinner ticket or something like that, you might want to put number of tickets sold. Hopefully I made sense in describing that. Of course, if you need clarification, feel free to reach out. Cash checker amount, that is just where you put in the aggregate of under $35 contributions received at that event. So if you received $100 in under $35 contributions, you put in $100 in cash check amount. In-kind value is if you receive an in-kind item or service at that fundraiser event. Again, under $35, you put it in in-kind value. And the same for in-kind description, you just fill in the description of whatever was provided to you guys. And you hit the submit button at the bottom of this page. And then once that appears on your report, you hit the save button. So after you hit the save button, it's going to pop up with that same success. The report has been saved message I was showing you earlier. And it's going to show up your fundraiser name, and that entry is going to show up on the list here. So you'll be able to see that actually was submitted into the finance report. We'll spend a little more time when we actually get into SIRS on fundraisers, because they tend to be a little bit tricky. If you have multiple type events, you can see here from this example, on the same date. So say we do a spaghetti feed, and at that spaghetti feed where we're charging folks for $10 for a plate of spaghetti, let's say, we're also doing a raffle for an item that we're gonna auction, or they're gonna raffle off. The raffle proceeds need to be reported separately from the spaghetti feed proceeds, because those are 2 separate fundraiser events, which I know that is confusing. If you guys ever have a question about whether something was separate events or not, or needs to be reported separately, or anything like that, please give us a call. We can work to make you understand that and get it properly reported. And we're always willing to work with folks to answer those kinds of questions. So the next type of contribution is refunds. I think rebates are also included in this tab. It's not really very commonly used, I wouldn't say. Certainly not the most commonly used tab we have, but it is somewhat used. That's why it's there. Really, it's meant for if you say pay for a service, and then you you end up getting a refund because they can't provide it. They're sold out, the vendor is, or they didn't, give it to you timely, so they're canceling the sale and giving you your money back. Anything like that would go in the refunds tab. Another common question is rebates. Like if you go to Staples and buy a bunch of office supplies and then they give you a $10 rebate down the road, you put that in the refunds tab. Again, it's probably our least commonly used contributions tab, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. You enter just like you would an individual contribution, a committee contribution, or a fundraiser contribution. Put the add button at the bottom of the screen. It pulls up this page. We enter an election type, date, amount, all that stuff. I'll make sure you hit submit and save. Okay, another area that you guys might get is bank interest on a bank account. That would go in the refunds tab. Yeah, my best recommendation for refunds is don't spend too much time worrying about it. If you have a question as to whether something qualifies as a refund or a rebate or not, just give us a quick call. We can probably figure it out in 2 minutes. It's not going to take us very long to know where that needs to be reported and help you stick it in the right place. And then the last type of contribution we have is loans. So by definition, any loan is a contribution. So you need to report it if you're receiving a loan because it does count as a contribution to the committee. Any loan, regardless of amount, does need to be reported in the loans tab. It has its own specific tab. Right here, the loans tab. Just like any other contribution, you click the add option, which pulls up a page where you put in the date, the amounts, the source of the loan, all of that stuff. Submit and save that. Always loans go in the loan tab. It's really the most important thing to remember on loans. And we'll get to this a little bit later. When you make a payment on a loan, you do not report it as an expenditure. I know that's everyone's impulse, but because it's reported as a loan, you need to report making the payment in the payments tab. Because the payments tab and the loans tab are essentially tied to each other. The payments tab will list all loans. And so that's where you want to make a payment. We'll get to that a little bit later. That is more of an expenditure activity than a contribution. So I don't want to confuse you all too much right now by diving into that too badly. And the final little piece of this, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, is Form C7. That is the source of contribution of $500 or more received from a single source between the 26th day of the month before an election and the date of the election. It does count for both primary and general election. This year, I believe that date is May 26th, but I'm not, I can't read my own writing, so don't quote me on that. If you'd like to know what that date is, please give us a call. We can walk you through that. I can find that date pretty easily. I just don't have it written down right now because I'm a sloppy writer. Yeah, so it doesn't kick in until May anyway, the C7s. And it's only for contributions received from a single source of 500 or more during a very specific time window. So there's no real reason to spend too much time on those right now when they're not going to come into play at all in this upcoming finance report. You will not need to enter any C7 information on this April 30th report. It's not the proper time window for that yet. So don't even worry about Form C7 quite yet. All right, so now we're going to go into the actual SIRS system. We're going to go back into this coffee pack finance report. I'm going to kind of walk you through all the tabs. As you can see in the contributions tab, we have an individual subtab, a committee subtab, a fundraiser subtab, a refunds subtab, a loan subtab. We also, which I haven't talked about yet, have this help subtab. The help subtab just provides information for each of the other tabs. So if you're stuck on where you should be reporting something, what information is required to go with that, that type of question, more than likely the help tab has the answer for you. So if you just navigate over to the help tab and say, oh, I have a question about the fundraiser tab. You just drop that down and it's got all this information here about the fundraiser tab. what needs to go in there, what doesn't need to go in there, et cetera, et cetera. So more than likely, if you ever have a question, the help tab does answer it, or will at least start answering that question. So to go back to the actual report, for individuals, to enter an individual contribution, you click the add button. You can see it pops up this page with election type, date. If you want to enter the name of the contributor manually, you can certainly do that using this last name, first name field. You can just type it in. You can also run an entity search. The entity search used to be the default option in SIRS. So those of you who are returning users are probably pretty familiar with the entity search. If the name has been entered in before as an entity, it's probably going to pop up on the entity search. So you're certainly welcome to use that search, but you don't have to. You can just manually enter the name of the contributing entity. And this goes for all types of contributions. It's not just individuals. I'll show you here in a sec. So I recommend, unless you want to do the entity search, my personal recommendation is just plug in that name in this field here, just type it in. Personally, I think that's a lot easier. You got the address, city, state, and zip, pretty self-explanatory. Occupation and employer. Again, occupation and employer is required for any individual contribution of $35 or more. You'd put in, employer, Sam Club, occupation, clerk. That's really all we're looking for is that type of information. We're not asking you to put, 70% of my time is this and 30% is that. Just employer name and job title is all you need to put there. Cash check amount, you put in the cash check amount field. You put in the amount that you received. In-kind value, you put in the amount of the item or service you received. It's not cash, with a description going in that in-kind description. When you're done, you hit the submit button and the save button. You always want to hit the save button. So for committee, you can see it's basically the same thing. You click the, go back. You click the add button, that little plus sign looking guy. Again, you can plug in the election type, the date of the contribution was received, the type of committee you received the contribution from. If it's a corporate contribution, so a corporate contribution you received from a corporate entity, you want to click that box saying it to signify it is a corporate contribution. You type in the name of the committee, their address, city, state, zip, cash check amount, the amount you received in cash or a check goes in this field. If you received an in-kind item or service, that value goes in the in-kind value field, with, of course, a description of the item or service received in the in-kind description. When you're done, of course, you hit the submit button and then the save button when you're done entering. So for the fundraiser tab, again, it's pretty much the same as all the other tabs and contributions. You click that add button and it pulls up the detail entry form where you can type in the election type, the date of the fundraiser, name of fundraiser, location, all that same information you entered for individual contributions or committee contributions in terms of the amount received and all that type of stuff. And it actually gives you examples in the field here already. So for example, Grain County Freedom Party Spaghetti Feed would be a perfect name of fundraiser. If you want to do Pass the Hat, again, I recommend you say Pass the Hat Bozeman, Pass the Hat Great Falls, Pass the Hat Butte, just so people, if they're just cursory looking at that, can tell the difference between that and another fundraiser you've reported. Location is just the venue in the city. So Metro Park, Billings, Museum of the Rockies, Bozeman. That's all you need to put in there. And again, the number of attendees, you fill in that field if it's a non-ticketed event where anyone can show up and make a contribution. If it's an event where you're selling tickets and the only way in the door is through buying a ticket, you put a number of tickets sold. Cash check amount is the aggregate amount of under $35 contributions received. In-kind value is, again, if you're receiving an in-kind item or service, so something of value that is not cash, that would go in the in-kind value field. And then if you need to describe that item, it goes in the in-kind description field. When you're done, and before that, you'll see at the bottom here, there's a reminder that each unique fundraiser activity must be reported individually. So again, if you have a fundraising dinner that also has a silent auction, the dinner needs to be reported as one fundraiser, the silent auction will be reported as another fundraiser. And again, if you ever get into a financial report, you start filling this out, and you realize, oh, we had this kind of event, and we had this activity and this activity, and I'm not sure if I'm reporting it right, I would recommend you click the Help tab. If the Help tab doesn't answer your question, please pick up the phone and give us a call or shoot us an email, and we can help get you sorted out. We understand, or I understand specifically, this can be confusing for you guys, you committees. You don't live solely in the campaign finance world, like we do from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. So we are here to try to assist you in determining where the right place is to enter something like that. So feel free to use us as a resource. And when you've entered everything, you hit the submit button, and then make sure you hit the save button. If you have a refund or rebate, bank interest, anything like that, you put it in refunds, etc. If you receive a loan, you put it in the loan tab. You click the add button, and it's basically just like entering an individual contribution. It's all the same information that's required. The only difference is it's a loan that you've received and are going to pay back instead of a contribution. So that's everything in the contributions tab. If you guys have questions, again, please send them to cpphelp@mt.gov. We will get to them as quickly as we can. What we're going to do next is we're going to go into the expenditures tab in CERS. We're going to kind of walk through campaign expenditures and how to report those. Give my voice a little second of break here. So, for expenditures, for committees, there are two different kinds of expenditures you can report. There are expenditures and there are independent expenditures. The difference being an independent expenditure is basically candidate activity. So it's something that you do to support or oppose a candidate or without that candidate's involvement. And we have those definitions up actually on our website, politicalpractices.mt.gov. The biggest difference between an expenditure and an independent expenditure when it comes to reporting is for an independent expenditure, you have to list the candidate or ballot issue that the expenditure was intended to benefit. So if you have an ad saying, Joe, coffee sucks, vote for iced tea, you need to report on an independent expenditure that it was meant to benefit iced tea. So to add an expenditure in CERS, I'll just go to the expenditures tab, and we'll go to this here in a minute, and click the add button, just like you would for a contribution. It's essentially the same process. It's going to ask for a little bit different information because it is an expenditure and not a contribution. So it's going to ask for the entity type. The options are bank, business, or individual. By far, the most common entity type is business, but occasionally you'll make an expenditure to an individual or a bank, and if that's the case, you choose bank or individual as the entity type. Election type, again, just roll with the same election type you've been using for your contributions. And just pick the same one every time so that everything goes in the same column. Date is the date of the expenditure. A common question or complaint we get with expenditures specifically does involve the date. Keep in mind, expenditures need to be reported on the date where the activity is incurred, not the date where the expenditure is actually paid or the invoice is actually physically received by you. So we get complaints a lot, actually, or inquiries a lot. Let's say candidate A or committee A has agreed to has agreed with a media company to run a television ad, for example, and they strike the agreement on April 1st, and then they receive the invoice on April 18th, and they pay out on April 21st. A common error is they then report the date as April 21st and report it as an expenditure. We'll get a little more in depth about how to avoid that type of error. That would be an error. You need to report it as a debt dated April 1st because it's the date you incurred the activity. So if you incur and pay for something on the same day, which for most committees is the de facto transaction with like a credit card, for example, or a debit card, because you're paying the entity right then and there. You put in the date where that activity has happened. Last name or vendor name, you just put in the name of the entity to whom you made the expenditure. So this would be, if it's a person, David Smith, or Walmart, Costco, Best Media Company, just whoever it is that you paid goes in the last name, vendor name field. Their address goes in street address. City, state, zip goes in the city, state, zip field. The amount goes in this amount field. You see you have these two options. Is this an over contribution limit refund? You only check that box if you're returning a contribution to an individual. For committees, again, there is no contribution limit that you can receive from an individual. So this trigger warning is not particularly relevant for you guys. Is expenditure paid out of corporation funds? If you're paying for something out of a segregated corporate account, you check that box. You have description of expense, e.g. stamps or mailers, pizza for volunteers, strategic advertising, 2 hours on social media plan. That's all the information we're really looking for on description of expense, as a brief description of that expense. The platform, looking for platform, so Facebook, Radio Station 1, Helena Independent Record, print edition, just where the activity appeared, if it's an ad or something like that. If it's like a mailer, for example, you can just put mail. If it's a poster, just put poster. We realize some of these things don't necessarily have that kind of platform like social media ad does. A mailer is a mailer, so you could just put that type of information in. Quantity is also required for every expenditure activity, essentially, with some limited exceptions. Contact us for those. I'm not going to get into them. Just the best rule of thumb is every expenditure requires the quantity information to be provided. So, for example, it could be 200 yard signs, 500 mailers, 2 posters. For any printed material, just the physical quantity of them. For a TV ad, radio ad, newspaper ad, something that may not have like a physical number of copies, but has a set run date, which most media ads will have, whether they be traditional media or digital media. For the quantity, you just put in their run dates. So you'd put in January 1st to April 1st, or the March 1 weekly edition of the magazine, or something like that. That would be fine. Just put in the run dates. The subject matter, we're just looking for a brief description of the material, so we can tell it apart from different similar expenditures. So top 10 reasons to vote for candidate, candidate's education policy, meet the candidate's family, just brief descriptions like that are fine. We have some examples at the bottom of that entry page. Hide that. We do have some examples down here about the type of information that you want to report in these fields. If you're reporting expenditures and you ever have any questions about, does this description provide enough detail, or what do I put in for quantity? You can always run those kinds of things by us when you're in the reporting process, and we can give you the, yay, that works, that's good, or you need more information, try this, for example, or what was the number. So feel free to reach out to us at that time. It tends to save a lot of headaches. If you have a question about something like that and you ask us when you're actually filling the report out in SERS versus waiting until after the report's been filed to wonder if that was enough information. All right, and so we have a little guidance PDF thing, just a little Photoshop graphic. This is available on our website on the Education and Resources page. It just very briefly sums up what I just spent minutes talking about. Does a better job of it than I did. It really, I think, shows well, we're not asking for all sorts of detailed treasure troves of information, specific, text of what was on the ad or anything like that. We're just looking for little brief pops of information so that we know essentially what the ad was about, or can easily figure that out, how it was different from maybe a similar ad or expenditure activity, and what the quantity was. That's really all we're looking for, is purpose, quantity, subject matter, and distinguish. It's really actually a simple process. It's not really actually not too hard to be able to distinguish with the quantity and subject matter of an ad. So to enter in expenditure, and we'll get to this in a minute, just like a contribution received, you have an option. You can use the entity search to search for the entity, which again used to be the default in SIRS. It used to be you had to do that. Nowadays, you can actually go to the row details tab, which I'll show you in a second, and just type in what you're looking for. So the entity name, individual's name. If it's a commonly used entity, so Facebook, Walmart, Pizza Hut, something is absolutely 100% going to be in SIRS already, I would recommend using the entity search and selecting an existing entity so you don't create a new one. But you always have the option, of course, to go to row details and just type in your entity name at any time. That is not any sort of problem. So again, anything that's not an independent expenditure, which we'll get into here in a second, goes in the expenditures tab. So when you enter it, just like an individual contribution. You click the add button, put in all your information in those fields I was just showing you, submit and save. After you save it, it will show up here. Entity, description, all that will show up right here. And if you successfully saved, you'll get that message at the top saying the report has successfully been saved for whoever it is. And that is up there for you, and it's in that report. So there are limitations to the amount of characters you can enter into SIRS to describe an expenditure. I believe, we're going back here a second, I believe in the description field, the limit is 150 characters, and for the rest of them, it is 2,000 characters. I think that's right. Again, don't quote me on that. I don't have that right in front of me, but I believe that's correct. We recognize that might not be enough information or enough room for you to put in everything. Or another common thing is, let's say you made 4 different expenditures to Jane Doe. Or let's say you made 40 different expenditures to Jane Doe in a singular reporting period. You always have the option, of course, of adding those 4 or 40 individual expenditures to Jane Doe in the finance report. Or what we recommend at that point is you just enter them as one expenditure with the cumulative amount spent. Say in the purpose field, see addendum, and you email us an addendum like this. In the subject line, you'd say addendum for committee name, C6 reporting period for expenditure to Jane Doe. And that's where you would break down each different expenditure to Jane Doe. So that way you don't have to enter in 4, 40, whatever it is, different expenditures in SIRS. At that point, it's probably easier for you to put in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, something like that. And you could just send it to us as an addendum on one expenditure in SIRS. Really, the addendum is really reserved for that type of activity, or if you have something where you just can't describe it in the number of characters provided, so you need more than 2,000 characters to describe subject matter, or you think you need more than 2,000 characters to describe the quantity, something like that, you could put that in an addenda. But again, you should be able to fit quantity, detail, subject matter information in those fields without using an addendum. It really shouldn't be necessary. The best use for an addendum is if you have, say 40 expenditures to that one entity, instead of putting in 40 different expenditures in a finance report, which would take quite a bit of time, I just put in one expenditure and then break it down with all that required detail in an addendum that you email to us, and then we can attach that to the report. All right, so next we're going to get to independent expenditures. So you add an independent expenditure exactly the same as a regular expenditure. Again, the only differences are you navigate to the independent expenditures tab instead of the expenditures tab. An independent expenditure will ask for the name of the candidate or issues the expenditure was intended to benefit. So that's, again, if you have the ad saying, Joe Coffee stinks. Even though you didn't mention iced tea, his opponent, you would need to put iced tea in the field for name of candidate or issue the expenditure was intended to benefit, because that is the candidate who it was intended to benefit. You certainly can choose to list the name of the candidate that you're opposing with that activity, but you're absolutely required to put in the name of the candidate the ad is meant to benefit, even if that candidate's name or image doesn't even appear in the ad. So yeah, it could be just simple as Joe Coffee is bad for kids. You still put iced tea in for name of candidates or issue the expenditure was intended to benefit, because they were the candidate that you're intending to benefit with that activity. You still need to put in the subject matter, quantity, detail, information, subject matter, all of that. That's all still required. The only real difference is you need to put in the name of candidate or issue the expenditure was intended to benefit. And so we have another nice little Photoshop graphic guide that Commissioner Mangan put together about independent expenditures. So it lays out how the reporting requirement for an independent expenditure, and really how that differs from a traditional expenditure. And then the information you need to report, which is who does it benefit, quantity and detail, and support issue information. If it's using corporate funds, remember, you could use corporate funds to fund an independent expenditure. You just need to check that box saying that there was corporate funds used in the reporting field. So we're going to actually go in and I'm going to show you in CERS what those tabs actually look like and kind of how they differ from one another. So we're going to get back into CERS. Every expenditure you enter goes in the expenditure tab. So you see here we have expenditures, and independent expenditures, and a help tab. Just like in the contributions field or tab, that this help tab provides information as to what is required to be reported, offers a little bit of guidance, those types of things. So if you have a question, again, I would guess the help tab probably has the answer. And if it doesn't, please give us a call, send us an email, ask us that question. We can help you get sorted out. So to add an expenditure, like a non-independent expenditure, just an expenditure, you click the add button, and that pulls up this page just like it does for contribution. If you want to use the entity search, you can use the entity search, but you are not required to. You can just go to row details and plug in the name. I'm going to actually enter in an expenditure here. So I'm going to say we made an expenditure on April 1st to Pizza Hut. And I don't actually know what their address is. I'm not going to waste your time looking that up. I'm just going to make one up for you guys. Please don't do this when you're finding financial report. Please actually look up the address if you don't know it. I just don't want to veer off on a tangent here looking for a Pizza Hut address while you guys are on the line. So for amount, you put in the amount that you expended. Is this an over contribution limit refund? No. Is this expenditure paid out of corporation funds? No. It's just a $50 expenditure we made. Description of expense, we're going to say pizza for volunteers. So let's say we bought some pizzas for some people volunteering time to do some sort of work on behalf of our committee. Is this an electioneering communication? No, it is not an electioneering communication, so I don't need to click that button. If you're curious, the definition of an electioneering communication is available on our website. I don't have that in front of me right this second. I can certainly get that to you if you send me an email requesting it, but I don't have it in front of me right now. Platform. So for something like pizza for volunteers, stamps for volunteers, envelopes, physical materials that you may purchase that you're not sending out to other people at that time, you can leave this platform field blank. So, we understand pizza doesn't have a platform, it's a pizza. A box of envelopes doesn't have a platform, it's a box of envelopes. Tape recorder doesn't have a platform, it's a tape recorder. So if it's a physical item like that, you can leave the platform field blank. Quantity, we're going to say we bought 5 pizzas. All you need to do is put in the number. Subject matter, again, for those physical items like pizzas, envelopes, stamps, recording machines, we realize those don't have a subject matter, so that you would leave blank. The subject matter would be for like a Facebook ad, a newspaper ad, a mailer you put out, anything like that would require a subject matter and would require the platform. So it's a little different for things you send out as a paid communication. And we have examples of paid communications down here at the bottom of that tab. So for example, newspaper ad in the Helena IR would be a paid communication where you're required to put in subject matter and platform. A Facebook post would be a paid communication where you need to put in subject matter, platform. Mailer, same thing. We have examples on what is and isn't a paid communication. If you just click on this link right here, it's available right on that reporting page in SIRS. It will take you to this page, which walks you through how to report a paid communication. So basically what a paid communication is, and what needs to be reported with that. So just another resource we have available for you guys to try to help you out and get your reporting stuff correctly in the right spots, and all that. So once you hit the submit button, you'll see it shows up here. Go ahead and hit the save button. You see success. The finance report was successfully saved for Coffee Pack. So that means the report saved. This expenditure will be in the report every time I access it for essentially the rest of time unless I delete it. And we strongly recommend you never delete something you've entered like that. So for an independent expenditure, you go to the Independent Expenditures tab. So it's the next tab over. Again, you click the Add button. It's basically the same process as a regular expenditure. So I'm going to add another example for you guys. So for entity type, you just choose bank, business, or individual. Most of the time is business, but again, that's not universal. It does depend on what type of entity you've paid. Election type, again, you just choose the election type you've been using. Date is the date the expenditure was made. I'm going to say it was on April 8th. Business name, that's just you put in the name of whoever you paid. So we're going to say it was Best Media Company, and they're a completely fake entity. So again, I'm going to make up an address. Again, please don't be making up addresses when you guys are actually filing these reports. I just don't want to go looking up, in this case it's a fake one, so it doesn't actually exist. But you guys need to actually look up the city, state, zip if you don't know what their address is, and street address is required. Amount is the amount you spent. So we're going to say we spent $1,000. Is this an over contribution limit refund? No. So don't check that box. Is this the expenditure paid out of corporation funds? No, because we haven't reported receiving any. If you're using corporate funds, make sure you check that box. Description of expense. So this is really where you just briefly describe what the expenditure was. We're going to say it was a television commercial. Oops. The name of the candidate or issue the expenditure was intended to benefit. This is where you put in the name of the candidate that was intended to benefit. So I'm gonna cycle back to this. It'll be easier to describe if I cycle back. So platform, we're going to say appeared on all NBC Montana stations. The quantity, it aired April 8th and 9th, so it's just a 2-day commercial. And we're going to say for the subject matter, iced tea is out of touch. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't really understand your average Montanan. Jay Coffee does, obviously. He's a man of the people. So even though our subject matter is iced tea is out of touch, and Jay Coffee is never mentioned in this independent expenditure, we put in Jay Coffee as the name of the candidate or issue the expenditure is intended to benefit, because the ad is meant to boost his candidacy at the expense of iced teas. Hopefully, I really hope that makes sense. That is a very important distinction when it comes to independent expenditures. You don't necessarily have to even mention the candidate or issue that the expenditure is intended to benefit. It might be all about their opponent. You still have to put the candidate who was going to benefit from that activity in this field here. It's one of the most common issues we see or questions we get. So I would strongly encourage you, if you have a question about that, to give us a call or send us an email, and we can really help you out with that. So when you're done, you hit that submit button, and then make sure you hit the save button. And so you see that independent expenditure shows up in our independent expenditures list. And so that's how you enter any independent expenditure goes in the independent expenditures field. Any expenditure goes in the expenditures field. If you have a question about whether an activity is an expenditure or an independent expenditure, please give us a call. We can help you figure that one out pretty quickly. Social media reporting, that is an area where we have seen some, mostly candidates, run into some issues. I suppose some of the committees are doing similar activities. I haven't seen quite as many questions on that front, but we're going to walk through social media anyway, because we recognize in 2020, social media is where a lot of people look for information. A lot of advertisements go on there. It's a platform a lot of people are utilizing, and that's totally fine. You're totally allowed to use social media to run ads or anything like that. We just would caution and remind everyone, you still need to record all the same information as you would for a radio ad or television ad or newspaper ad, any sort of traditional media ad like that. A social media ad still requires the same information. So you still need to provide a brief description of the content of the ad, and you would still need to describe the run dates of the ad in the quantity section. Just because it's a social media ad doesn't mean you don't have to report quantity or description information. You still need to provide that. So if you're adding expense from Facebook, for example, we have an example here on this slide about how you would do that. It's the same exact process as it would be for a newspaper ad, as it would be for a radio ad. It still requires all the same information I put in this Pizza Hut. Excuse me, let's use the other one because that's a better example. It still requires all the information I put in for this television commercial expenditure. It's just instead of description of a television commercial, you put in Facebook ad. The platform, you put in Facebook. But you still need to put in quantity, subject matter. All that's still required. The only difference, essentially, is that the platform is Facebook instead of television or radio or what have you. And so we do have the option too for expenditures to provide an addendum. So just like a contribution or just like any other expenditure I was talking about earlier, you could put in see addendum, and really any one of these fields would be fine. You don't have to do it in the subject matter field. You just let us know, see addendum. Like this is perfect. See addendum for 4 ads, yada yada. And you just email us an addendum with that information in it, laying out the quantity, subject matter, time frame, all of that for those social media ads. Specifically, it all has to be the same entity, essentially. So here's an example of a sample addendum for Facebook ads for the report as one expenditure to Facebook. And here's the breakdown of the actual ads. This would be considered acceptable for us for reporting standards, as long as you actually remember to send the addendum. This is where one of the places where I have to stress, if you're going to use an addendum like this, which is certainly allowed, and we certainly encourage, especially for committees that are running, maybe dozens of expenditures from the same entity at any one time. You want to report that as one expenditure with an addendum instead of 12 separate expenditures. Please, in the subject matter of the email, tell us who the committee is, so the name of the committee, and what report this goes to. We do receive a lot of addendums that don't have either one of those pieces of information. And without that, we don't know what committee is filing or what report this goes for. We're clueless. And if we just get an addendum from someone named Jen, and the email just comes jen@gmail.com and just says, please see my addendum, thanks. We obviously don't know what committee this addendum is for, what report it was for. So we'll probably send an email back asking for that. But if you don't send that information on a reply, if all you send is the addendum email and it doesn't have any of that information, that addendum's never going to be posted because we don't know what to do with it. If someone files a complaint saying you didn't send in that addendum or you didn't provide reporting information, and your response is, well, we emailed the addendum, and the response you get back from us is, you never told us it was you. So please, please, please put in the name and the reporting window in the subject line if you're going to be using an addendum. And so this is pretty specific to Facebook. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this. There is an option to boost organic posts. An organic post being something that you just maybe put on your Facebook page that you're not paying to produce, you're not paying to promote. Maybe you just put on a thing saying, hey, y'all, remember to vote for Jay Coffee on election day. And you just put that on your committee's Facebook timeline, you'll pay for it. And then you decide, oh, well, a lot of people like this. I want to boost it and get more people to see this. And you end up boosting the post here, which I am certainly not an expert on that part of this. I've never boosted a post in my life. But should you do that and you pay to boost that post, it becomes a paid communication that you need to report. And there is a tool called Ads Manager on your Facebook page, where you can go look at any ad you've paid to promote in the past on Facebook. It's basically just a living archive of paid Facebook ads. So if you need information on when it was posted and when it was boosted, how much paid, anything like that, it's going to be available for you in this Ads Manager. So you can find that directly from Facebook. Those paid Facebook ads like that are not something we can find for you. So we can recommend you look at the Ads Manager, and if you still don't have the information there, you might have to contact Facebook. It's a Facebook ad. But that is not something CoPP staff can find for you. We do get that question occasionally, and I'm sorry, but the answer is we can't find it for you. But Facebook has a lot of resources to help people track that already. And if you're boosting posts frequently, you probably know more about where to find that and how to do that than I do. So you're probably more an expert than I am if you're doing that already. So we got ad transfer. I'm going to skip this part because it kind of falls into the attribution, which we'll talk about in a minute. Again, we have the Form C7, or Form C7E. So this is like the C7 for contributions. Only Form C7E deals with expenditures only. Form C7E is if the committee expends $500 or more to a single source on the 26th day of the month before an election and the date of the election. So it needs to be filed within 2 business days after the expenditure has been made. So we have a link to our reporting calendars page, and if you access this PowerPoint as a PowerPoint. It's also available on our website, politicalpractices.nt.gov. We're going to go back there. So here's the reporting calendars page. If you scroll down, you see there's the committee and special committee reporting dates page. This has all the information for committees when you need to report in 2020. Those of you on the traditional election calendar, if you're participating in a special election on a different date, please reach out to us with that election date, as that does impact your reporting dates. But this calendar, this first calendar here, is for those of you involved in the traditional election dates. So the C7 and C7E period is May 26th through June 2nd. C7 is each time you receive a contribution of $500 or more from a single source. Form C7E is expenditures of $500 or more to a single source during that time period. And that is available on this reporting calendars page on our website here. All right, so we're going to go in. We're going to kind of wrap things up here on attribution. I think there's a few things to discuss after attribution. This is really the last super important part. So this says social media attribution. I'm going to talk about attribution on all materials. Anything you pay to publicly distribute needs to have the paid for by attribution on it. So that goes for mailers you're sending out, posters you're putting up, Facebook ads, newspaper ads, television ads, anything that you're publicly distributing needs to have this paid for by message. So we have a web page for this, politicalpractices.mt.gov/attribution. On the CoPP homepage. For political committee, the attribution needs to say paid for by committee name, treasurer, and address. So it needs to have the committee name, the treasurer, and the address. And that's all available on the attribution page on our website. The PowerPoint is kind of built for this on social media ads. It applies to all ads, whether they're social media or your more traditional media, so newspapers, radios, etc. If it is a radio ad, for example, you can say the attribution. And if it's a TV ad or a Facebook ad or any sort of video ad, you have the option where you can say it, or you can have it in text at the bottom of the screen. For a social media ad, it can be in the ad itself, which is what I would recommend. So if it's a video, maybe at the end of the video you say the paid for by, or you have that scroll across the bottom of the page at the end of the video. It can also be in the actual post. So say you have a text post and then a video you've boosted, and those are together. You can put the attribution in the post as well. But it needs to be on that material. If you have questions about the attribution, please feel free to give us a call or email. Attribution is by far the most common type of complaint we deal with. We get a lot of complaints from citizens sort of informally that so-and-so doesn't have an attribution on this or that. The remedy, so you guys are aware for attribution, is that Commissioner Mango or myself will reach out to the group who's alleged to not have the attribution. If you do have the attribution, we give you an opportunity to show us that you do in fact have the attribution on the material in question. If you don't, we give you an opportunity to add that attribution to the material. So there is a remedy. If you forget it, and you forgot it, you can add it retroactively. Reach out to us and let us know that was the case. Attribution is pretty easy and straightforward to actually deal with and remedy. But it's very important that you guys remember to put the attribution on any sort of paid and publicly distributed material. And the actual last thing we have to talk about of importance today is debts and payments on loans. So if you remember when I was talking about the loans tab in the contributions section of this presentation, like an hour ago, this is kind of relevant to that discussion if you remember any of that. So we'll start with debts since we have been talking about expenditures. A common reporting error, which I talked about earlier, is waiting for an invoice to report campaign activity something you've paid for or promised to pay for. You need to report an expense when that activity has occurred. If you haven't already paid for it at that time, you report it as a debt. Debts do require all the same reporting information as traditional expenditure. So quantity, detail, subject matter, that is all required information. You just report it as a debt if you haven't paid it yet. If you don't know the amount of something, so we recognize in a state like Montana, you may contract with your neighbor for some sort of service or goods or something like that. And when you ask him, what's the damage? Say, I'll get you an invoice later. If that's the case, you still report the activity when you incurred it to the best of your ability. You can always estimate on the amount if it's something you don't have a firm amount on yet. As long as it's a good faith estimation of what it is, you're all right estimating. You can always go back and amend. And if you're incorrect in your estimate, you can go back later and put the actual invoice amounts in. It's important to remember, report debts with the same level of detail as any other expenditure. So you'll see here, adding a debt's a little bit different, doesn't give you quite as many fields to enter. In this purpose of debt, you would need to put in all quantity, subject matter, platform, all that type of information you need to go here. So something like billboard in Helena, May through August 2020, 4 cheers for a 4-day work week. Facebook ad ran August 1 through August 4, Jay Coffey's family. And you put that, if it's a debt, that's what you put in for purpose of debt. Again, if you have questions at the time of filing your report about debts, please give us a call. We can help you out. It's easiest to, as I've said before, it's easiest to work with these things at the time you're filing the report versus after you've already filed something, for example. To report a payment on a debt, you use this Payments tab. And it's the same for any loan. If you click into the Payments tab, it will list all debts and all loans owed by the committee. If you need to make a payment, you click this Add Payment icon. So we'll actually go into SERS here to take a look at that. And so this committee has not reported any debts at this time. I don't believe we've reported any loans either. No, we have not. It's okay though. So if you go to the Payments tab, if you click on this Add Payment, it's not a perfect example because we haven't reported any, but all your debts and loans will show up in the list here, just like any contributions you received show up or any expenditures you report show up. You click the Add Payment, and it pulls up a window where you can actually make a payment on a debt or a loan. You do not necessarily have to pay off the entire amount of a debt or loan at once. So say, for example, you have a $1,500 debt, and you have $200 extra cash on hand, so you decide we're going to make a $200 payment on that debt. The system would show that you made a $200 payment on the date you made a payment, and it would still show $1,300 as the balance due, and the system automatically tracks that. So don't feel like when you incur a debt or accept a loan, you have to pay that all back at one time. You don't have to pay it all back at once. All right, so a nice tip we have that we give at every one of these trainings is when it comes to finance reports, you can start a new report the second you file your previous report. So if you have a report in pending status, you cannot start a new report until that report has been filed. You don't have to wait until the actual reporting day to go start a report, file it, all that. What we recommend is that the second you're done filing a given report, so say on April 30th, you file your finance report for this period, we recommend that once you get that filed, you go start a new report for the May 30th reporting date. You can start that at really any time. You can enter stuff at any time. And none of the information in that report is public until you actually certify and file the report. So as long as it's in pending status, the only people who can see what's in there are you, the user, and then we can see it administratively if we choose to log in and look at it. Or you call with a question, we can go in administratively and look at that. But the public cannot see what's in there until you filed it. So we strongly encourage candidates and committees to start their report early, work on it periodically, and then when reporting day comes around, all you have to do is go to the File tab and certify and file it. It makes things really, really easy. So Certify and File tab, it's the tab at the end. I'll walk you through this. I'm going to go ahead and file my report in a second. You navigate to the File tab. You have a couple options for certification. It's probably easier actually to show you in the report, so that's what I'm going to do. We go to the File tab, and so you see check this box to display the name and address of contributors who have contributed less than 35. That's if you enter individual contributors in the individual tab in contributions of amounts under $35. The search system default is to not show their name, address, etc. On the public view of the report. It just aggregates those contributions together. If you want them to show up individually, you can click this box and they will appear individually. So it's really up to you whether you want them to show or not. This is the closing report box. Please do not check this box unless it's actually a closing financial report. Once you check this box and file a report as a closing report, you will not have access to go in and file new financial reports. So if you, say, on the 30th, go to file your report and accidentally check that box, once you file, your status is going to show up as closing, and you will not have access to start any new financial reports under that profile. So if you're actually closing the committee, please do check that box. That lets us know that you are a closed committee, but most of you do not want to check that box because you're not actually closing, and you want to keep filing financial reports. So the only thing you actually have to click on the certification is this certification box. I certify the foregoing report of committee finances is true, complete, and correct to the best of my knowledge, in accordance with Montana Code Annotated Title 13, Chapter 37. Basically just you saying, I know to the best of my abilities that what I put in there is true. After you click that box, you hit certify and file. It comes up with basically a warning message asking if you're sure. If you are sure, continue. You might get a warning message. Our ending balance is negative. Didn't notice that. not a huge problem. So when you successfully file a report, it will say success. The political committee finance report was successfully filed for coffee back. So scroll down here and you can see a report from March 26th through April 25th. The one we've been working on this whole time is now in filed status. So it's been filed. And what we recommend is after you file your report, you go to the Add New C6 button, you click on that. You see a starting date of April 26th automatically shows up. We're going to go choose May 25th as our ending date. I'm going to save that report. I have now started the next finance report, which is what we recommend you do immediately after filing this one. And then you can work on any contributions or expenditures in this pending report at any time. When you get to May 25th and you have another report due, all you'll have to do is file that report if you're working on it periodically. So again, that makes it a lot easier on you to actually get things filed. Upload is an option to upload contributions received or expenditures made. It's a very specific technical process. Most people don't do it. It's not a general upload of PDFs, Word documents, etc. It is a very technical document with very specific guidance. If you do upload or like to upload, you can contact CoPP for the templates. But unless you're already using them or have so much bulk data that you're already using like an Excel or other electronic platform to create your finance report, we don't recommend you use the upload function. So contact us if you'd like to know more about it, but we really discourage folks from using that option. And the final piece of the reporting process is the inspections and exams process. So the CoPP has to review every report filed with the office. So we report every committee report that we receive. It's really a method for us to try to communicate to you potential areas we see where there are concerns or not enough information provided or things like that. So if we see you're missing a bunch of individual contributor information, for example, we'll point that out. Or if you're missing quantity or detail for an expense, we'll point that out on an inspection form. The inspection form covers just one report, so just one reporting period. The exam covers all financial reports you filed during a given election year. So for example, the inspection report would cover the April 20th finance report, whereas the exam would cover your entire year's for the financial reports. And it's essentially just us trying to provide assistance to you guys. Maybe you forgot to put something in, didn't save something, entered something in the wrong field. That's really what we're trying to help you with on the inspection report, and trying to avoid complaints where we can. It's a lot easier if you're missing information or you need to include extra stuff. It's much easier to get that in a report through the inspection or exam process than the complaint process. And if we never had to do a complaint because everyone responded to the inspection reports, I would be just about the happiest person on planet Earth. The only person who might be happier would be Commissioner Megan. So if you receive an inspection report or exam from us, know that it's just us trying to provide assistance. We're not going to catch everything, obviously, but we do tend to do pretty well at catching big stuff, or if you're making the same error over and over again, we're generally pretty good at catching that. It's just a method of us reaching out to you to try to work with you to avoid potential concerns or problem areas. There is a formal complaint process in the state of Montana. Any citizen can file a complaint against a candidate or a political committee. If you receive an inspection report for your financial reports, and it's talking about something, you respond with us and provide that information as requested, or work with us to get everything on the same page, you're more than likely going to avoid the complaint process. Or if you don't avoid it, we might be able to supersede it through the inspection process, if that makes sense. So keep in mind, we don't actually file complaints that are citizen-driven. It's our duty to respond to them if they're filed. We have to process it and all that fun stuff. But if you're engaging in the inspection report process, you reach out to us with other methods to get this done, that complaint process is probably not going to matter much to you, because you probably won't be involved in it. So we got, coming up to the end of the presentation, we got some resources on our website. So candidate committee information, forms, the reporting calendars page, contribution links page. We have on our website an education and resources page that's kind of a catch-all for all our different guides and infographics, all that type of stuff. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, obviously I couldn't cover everything in this type of format in such a limited time frame. And as one person, there are obviously things I forgot to mention or that you probably had questions about that I didn't get to. This committee and treasurer guide probably has your answer. So I strongly recommend, if you have questions, maybe take a look at this guide. And if you still have a question, go ahead and ask us. We are also available on Facebook and Twitter. We have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter page. It says we have YouTube. That's not actually set up yet, and I'm not aware how or when it's going to be. We're a little in the weeds with campaign finance stuff right now, and trying to do stuff like these trainings and assist candidates and committees filing. So we haven't really had the time yet to figure out the YouTube thing. But we do have Facebook, we do have Twitter. If you send us a message on Facebook or tweet at us, we may well respond. So we are active. We tweet out reminders and things from those accounts. That's really what they exist for. We try to send out reminders via email. If you would like to receive reminders about reporting dates and you're not currently receiving those emails, send us an email at cpphelp@nt.gov, and we can add you to that reminder list. Again, if you have specific questions about campaign finance, disclosure, or reporting, again, feel free to ask the question via cpphelp@nt.gov. We'll get you an answer as soon as we possibly can. And with that, that is the end of our training. We're done 20 minutes early. So I thank you guys all for attending today. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to ask us, and we'll get to them as fast as we can. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys all sticking with us with all the technological errors I seem to be having. Thank you for dealing with me for a couple hours. I really do appreciate it.